When I first started taking photos, for a while, photography is kind of either a lucky hit or total miss. The reason I say that is because sometimes I take boring photos, but I don't know how to fix it. And sometimes I take great shots, but I don't know why it works. After spending some time doing some research, eventually I found the solution, and actually I found the solutions on the art books. What I'm missing is something called toning. Toning is a very important concept in art, but not many photographers talking about it. So toning is basically three elements: is the highlight, midtone, and shadow. Highlight is pretty much the brightest pixels in your photo. They're close to pure white. Shadow is those dark pixels in the photo. They're close to the pure black. And then the midtone is kind of like somewhere in the middle and work as a glue to keep the highlight and the shadow work together. Toning is more tricky for photographers other than for artists, because artists, they have to paint everything. So they always do everything with intention. But for photography, it's different because everything can be done with just a click of shutter. So you could have a whole bunch of tonings and you're not even aware of. And this could cause us issue because we not just need toning, we also need a toning to be balanced. A balanced toning for a photo is almost like a balanced nutrition for a person. Everyone needs balanced nutrition, but for each person, this could mean different formula. The same idea applies to the photo. Each photo requires a different way of balancing the toning. Let's talk about the two main functions of toning. With the shadow, midtone, and highlight, with these three different types of elements, we create a sense of dimension, of form, or depth. This will be very important when your photo is about a single subject, for example, portrait. Let's take a look at some examples. These are the examples that how toning is supposed to work on portrait. But let's take a look at some bad examples as well. So as you can see in this first shot, this photo has a lot of shadow and midtone, but lack of a highlight. This lack of a highlight makes the photo look flat. Let's see what happens if I add a flash, add the highlight back, and what it's gonna look like. As you can see, with the addition of a little bit of a highlight, the photo just looks a lot more 3D, a lot more interesting. Now let's take a look at another example. In this shot, you can see we got the highlight and we have a lot of shadow, but we don't have enough midtone. So this lack of midtone causes two problems. The first, the 3D form is missing. The second is we're missing some important detail information. Normally people fix this, they will use the editing software, they do the shadow recovery. But this is not gonna fix the issue because they basically just turn the shadow into midtone, and then you still miss the range of toning. So let's see what happened after I add midtone to the image by using actual lighting. As you can see right now, the photo looks a lot more 3D, and also we got the missing detail information back. By the way, if you like shooting portrait and you're interested to learn how to use off-camera flash to get a natural look, you should check out my online course. In that course, I'll walk you through it step by step from evaluating the background to setting up the light till I get to the final look. You will see how I use different lighting setups to create different lighting effects. You will see how I shoot at different type of location at dealing with different lighting conditions. I believe after this course, you will definitely bring your portrait skill to a different level. So next time you go in there and shoot, you'll be a lot more confident. No more guesswork. Okay, now let's back to the toning. So I show you some examples, some good examples, some bad examples, but there's still two important tips that I need to talk about. The first is the highlight area cannot be too large. Highlight is a tricky area because you only need a tiny little bit of it. The problem when you add too much highlight is First, the photo might look overexposed. The second is, because you make the highlight area much larger, they end up look like a hotspot on your subject's face. It just causes more distraction. It's not a very good look. So that's about the highlight. Now let's talk about the midtone and shadow. Midtone and shadow usually they're a lot more forgiving. But we need to keep in mind midtone and shadow, the shifting between the midtone and shadow will shift the mood of the photo. When you have a lot of shadow and a little bit of midtone, the photo will look dark and moody. On the other hand, if you have a lot of midtone and a little bit of shadow, the photo is going to look soft and natural. So how you balance the midtone and shadow, it all depends on what mood you're trying to create. Okay, that's the first function of toning, which is create dimension. Let's take a look at the second function of toning. Because we have this higher range of toning from the darkest shadow to the brightest highlight and the midtone in between, this gave a range of luminosity, and this range of luminosity helped to build a contrast. With the contrast, the photo will look more dynamic and more punchy. Of course, contrast serves another important function, which is direct viewers' attention. So you can use contrast to direct your viewers' attention to where it's important in the image. Let's take a look at some examples. In this photo, you can see we have a lot of shadows, but these shadows almost work as a complement color, like they complement the highlight in the photo, which is exactly the focal point of the photo, these two guys talking in the train station. You can see other than the dark shadow and the highlight, we also have just enough midtone, just give us enough information about this bridge, the concrete, the wall, and the sidewalk. Let's take a look at another example. In this example, you can clearly tell that the focal point of this photo is the facade of the basilica because it's the brightest area. But it appears the brightest area of the photo is because the sky is darker, the people walk on the street in the foreground is darker, and the side of the building is darker. So they give a different range of tone, and these different range of tone help us draw attention to the facade of the basilica, which is the focal point of the photo. Now let's take a look at how we can change the dynamic of photo by simply compose the photo a little bit differently. So this is a shot of the Capitol building in Havana, and it's an okay photo, but let's see what happens if we incorporate more elements in the photo. As you can see, after we introduce more darkness into the photo, we increase the tonal range of the photo, so the photo looks more dynamic, more contrasty, and more interesting. Talking about using toning to build a contrast, there's something that you need to pay attention to and that you need to be careful with, because the contrast is so powerful on directing your viewer's attention. So if you do this without intention, you could direct your viewer's attention away from what's important. Let's take a look at an example. In this shot, the focal point of the photo is going to be the sculpture in the center, but unfortunately it's under the shadow. So because our eye tend to follow the contrasty area or the brightest area, so the rock in the foreground and this wall in the background actually cause distraction. To distract your viewer's eye away from what's important. Let's see what happened when we come back here again, shooting a different time. This time the lighting is fall on the sculpture. So you can see right now, we still have the same level of contrast, but viewer's attention is very clearly going to focus on what's most important. So this is an example to show you that why it's very important that you have to make sure when you use contrast to direct viewers' attention, you should always do this with the intention. So if you want to learn more about how to use contrast to direct viewers' attention, I have a video in my channel. I'll leave a link on the description. Okay, summary. Toning has three elements, which is highlight, midtone, and shadow. Toning serves two main functions. One is build dimension, second is build contrast. If your photo is mainly about single subject, for example portrait, then building dimension should be the priority. If your photo is about the whole scene, for example landscape or street photography, then building the contrast should be your priority. When you use toning to build dimension, you need to do first, make sure your highlight is not too big, because otherwise it's going to turn into a hotspot or make your photo look overexposed. Second, you can shape the proportion between the shadow and the midtone depends on the mood. More shadow, more darker moody. More midtone, more soft and natural. The second function of toning is build contrast. When you use toning to create contrast of a photo, you have to do this with intention, because otherwise you could cause distraction. Alright, this is what I want to share with you guys about how to use toning to enhance your photography. I hope you liked the video. Hit the like and subscribe if you haven't done so, and I'll see you next time.